The collapse of an empire rarely begins with swords or fire. It starts quietly, inside the mint. Metal shaved off a coin here, a promise stretched thinner there. The citizens don't notice it at first. Markets still hum, soldiers still march. The emperor still smiles on his silver throne, but the numbers on the ledger begin to whisper something sinister. The empire is eating itself, and the pattern is older than history itself. The Roman denarius was once the most trusted coin in the known world, a shining symbol of stability and strength. It bought loyalty, financed conquests, and bound millions under one currency. But centuries later, the same empire that conquered the Mediterranean with silver coins would crumble under the weight of its own debased money. The parallels to the modern US dollar are almost unnerving. The same logic that doomed the denarius, short-term survival over long-term value, is playing out again in slow motion. How does a civilization lose its currency, and with it, its future? Let's go back to where the cycle began. In 201 BCE, as Rome fought the Second Punic War, the state minted the denarius, a coin nearly pure in silver, roughly 4.5 grams of solid value. The Roman Republic was pragmatic, disciplined, and relentless. Its money reflected that ethos. Each denarius bore the face of the gods, a divine assurance that this silver disc was not just a medium of exchange, but a promise of order. For generations, that promise held. Soldiers were paid in denarii. Trade across Europe, Africa, and Asia used the coin as the gold standard of its day. Roman merchants could walk into markets from Gaul to Judea and buy with confidence. The denarius was trust embodied in metal. But as Rome expanded, the empire's appetite outgrew its discipline. Wars were expensive. Roads, aqueducts, and legions didn't pay for themselves. The empire that had once been a self-sufficient republic transformed into a bureaucratic machine fueled by tribute, conquest, and the illusion of endless growth. When the conquests slowed, the math stopped working. By the reign of Emperor Nero in the 1st century CE, the treasury was under strain. Nero's solution wasn't new, it was clever accounting in metal. He reduced the silver content of the denarius from about 97% to 93%, then 90%, quietly stretching every ounce of silver a little further. The coins still shone. The people still trusted them. The illusion of value held, for a while. But this small deception planted the seed of decay. Once a government discovers that it can create value without earning it, restraint becomes impossible. Each successive emperor faced the same pressures: armies to pay, infrastructure to build, political rivals to appease. When taxes weren't enough, they debased the coinage further. Under Emperor Caracalla in the early 3rd century, the denarius had lost nearly half of its silver. Under Gallienus, it was less than 5%. By then, Rome was running on faith alone. Citizens began to notice the coins looked duller, lighter. Merchants demanded more coins for the same goods. Soldiers demanded higher pay to keep up with rising prices. Inflation wasn't an abstract number. It was a daily humiliation. The empire tried to fix the problem by issuing new coins, new denominations, new promises. Each was worth less than the one before. The economic spiral accelerated alongside political chaos. As trust in the currency died, so did trust in the empire's institutions. People began hoarding real silver and gold, refusing government coinage. Trade slowed. The once unified economy fractured into barter and local exchange. The empire's roads, once bustling with commerce, grew empty. The army, no longer paid in money of real value, grew restless and mutinous. Eventually, generals stopped obeying emperors altogether. The economic death spiral had completed its first modern cycle, from sound money to fiat illusion to collapse. In a desperate attempt to restore control, Emperor Diocletian tried something bold. In 301 CE, he issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, a sweeping law fixing the prices of goods and services across the empire. He blamed merchants and speculators for inflation, not the empire's own debasement. Violators were punished severely, but no law can override arithmetic. When the value of money is destroyed, price controls only make scarcity worse. Farmers stopped bringing food to market. Black markets flourished. Inflation raged on. Rome's monetary collapse wasn't just an economic failure, it was psychological. The empire had broken its contract with its citizens. The coins once trusted as silver were now symbols of deceit. By the time the Western Empire fell in 476 CE, the denarius had vanished entirely, replaced by barbarian currencies and regional barter. The Roman economy never recovered its unity. Its fall became a timeless warning. Once money loses meaning, collapse follows. But history, it seems, has a short memory. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years. The United States emerged from World War II as the new Rome, a global superpower with its own trusted coin, the US dollar. Backed by gold and enforced by industrial might, the dollar became the reserve currency of the world. Under the 1944 Bretton Woods system, every dollar was pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Nations traded freely, confident that American paper was as good as gold. It was a beautiful illusion, until it wasn't. By the 1960s, the US faced the same imperial dilemma that haunted Rome. Maintaining global dominance was expensive. Wars in Korea and Vietnam, vast social programs, and growing deficits stretched the treasury thin. Foreign nations began to doubt that the US could redeem its dollars for gold. They started calling in their chips. In 1971, President Richard Nixon faced a crisis. If America kept redeeming dollars for gold, its reserves would vanish. His solution was eerily Roman: suspend the gold standard. Overnight, the dollar, once a claim on tangible metal, became pure fiat. Value backed not by substance, but by confidence. It was supposed to be temporary. It never ended. The following decades mirrored the late Roman trajectory, only this time with computers instead of coins. Freed from the limits of gold, governments could print money at will. Credit expanded exponentially. The dollar became the world's default currency, its power enforced by economic dominance and military strength. For a while, this system seemed unstoppable. America could borrow endlessly because everyone wanted its money. But the numbers tell a familiar story. In 1971, US federal debt was about $400 billion. By the 1990s, it had passed $4 trillion. After 2008, $10 trillion. After the pandemic stimulus of 2020, over $30 trillion. Meanwhile, the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen by roughly 90% since the gold window closed. The average American worker now needs over 5 times as many dollars to buy the same goods their grandparents could afford half a century ago. Sound familiar? Like Nero and Caracalla, modern policymakers frame monetary expansion as a necessary measure: temporary, controlled, even compassionate. Each round of printing is justified by crisis: a war, a recession, a pandemic. Each time, the temporary measures become permanent. Each time, the foundation erodes a little more. Today, the dollar is still strong, but only by comparison. Global trust remains, but it's fragile. Central banks around the world are quietly diversifying away from US assets. Gold purchases by national banks have reached multi-decade highs. Digital currencies and trade agreements in local denominations are eroding the dollar's monopoly. For the first time since World War II, an alternative financial order is emerging, and inflation, officially around 3 to 5%, has become a permanent feature, not a temporary glitch. The middle class feels poorer, savings erode silently, and real wages stagnate even as nominal numbers rise. Rome called it coin clipping. We call it quantitative easing. The technology changes, the pattern does not. The deeper truth is uncomfortable. Once a nation's currency is untethered from reality, politics follows. Easy money breeds dependency, corruption, and polarization. When value is created by decree instead of effort, wealth flows to those closest to the source of issuance: governments, corporations, and financiers. Ordinary citizens, the ones paid last and taxed first, absorb the cost through inflation. It's not theft in the legal sense, but it is theft in the moral one. We like to believe that modern economics has evolved beyond ancient mistakes, that central banks, algorithms, and fiscal policy make us smarter than the emperors who ruined Rome. But every empire believes it's different. Every generation convinces itself that this time, the system is too sophisticated to fail. Yet the data suggests the same trajectory. Consider the following. Throughout history, no fiat currency has ever survived indefinitely. Every major empire, from Rome to Ming China, from France's assignats to the British pound, has eventually devalued its currency into oblivion. The timeline varies, but the pattern does not. It begins with prosperity and sound money. Then come the wars, the debts, the spending justified as exceptional. Then the quiet debasement, the rationalizations, the controls, the social unrest, and finally, collapse or reset. The cycle is not just economic, it's psychological. Once trust dies, no decree can restore it. The United States now stands at a similar crossroads. The dollar remains dominant, but it is no longer invincible. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet has multiplied eightfold in 2 decades. Interest payments on the national debt are now one of the government's largest expenses. Entitlement programs face insolvency within years. And yet, the system's survival depends on continuous expansion, just as Rome's did. Some economists argue this is sustainable indefinitely, that as long as productivity and confidence hold, the dollar will remain the global anchor. But history argues otherwise. Every currency built on faith eventually faces a reckoning, and that reckoning never announces itself politely. When Rome's coins first lost their luster, citizens didn't riot immediately. They adjusted, rationalized, adapted. It wasn't until the empire's borders crumbled, its trade vanished, and its soldiers deserted that people realized the truth. The money had died long before the empire did. The corpse just hadn't stopped moving yet. If there's a breaking point for modern America, it may not come as a crash, but as a slow unraveling. A steady migration away from the dollar's dominance. Already, major economies are settling oil trades in Chinese yuan. Nations once bound to U.S. Treasury bonds are exploring alternatives. Domestic unrest over inequality, debt, and the cost of living grows louder every year. These are not isolated events. They are symptoms of the same disease that consumed Rome. The erosion of trust in value itself. Technology gives this cycle new weapons. Digital currencies, both private and state-controlled, could accelerate the end of traditional money. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, promise efficiency, but also offer total control. In a world where money exists only as code, the temptation to manipulate value for political convenience grows almost irresistible. In the late Roman Empire, Diocletian tried to legislate value. In the modern age, policymakers can code it. The lesson of the Denarius is not about metal or minting, it's about human nature. The tendency to trade discipline for comfort, truth for convenience, value for illusion. Every civilization eventually faces a moment when it must choose between painful honesty and comforting deceit. Rome chose the latter, and fell. The question is whether America, or any modern empire, will do the same. 3 lessons emerge from this 1,000-year pattern. First, money is not just economics, it's trust. When governments debase currency, they erode the invisible contract that holds society together. No nation can survive long once its citizens no longer believe in the value of their own labor. Second, inflation is not merely rising prices, it's moral decay made visible. It rewards debt over thrift, speculation over work, and power over honesty. It turns savers into victims and gamblers into heroes. Third, every empire thinks it can outsmart arithmetic. None ever have. The Roman denarius once ruled the world, until its silver turned to dust. The US dollar now carries the same torch, and the same peril. The question is not if the cycle will repeat, but when, and who will pay the price when it does. So as we swipe our cards, tap our phones, and watch numbers flicker across screens, it's worth asking, what gives those digits meaning? Is it the paper, the policy, or the promise? History whispers a warning. The moment we stop asking that question, the spiral begins. If you found this story thought-provoking, stay curious. The past isn't dead, it's a mirror. And the reflection staring back may be our own. Subscribe, share, and keep questioning what money really means, before it's worth nothing at all.